All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Make Pro Bono Work for You, presented by the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers. We are excited to have you all here today. And as a reminder, this course, it will be for 1 hour CLE credit for the State Bar of Texas. It will need to be self-reported. The course number will be put in the chat towards the end of the presentation. I would also like to invite all of you to submit Q&A questions in the chat function within Zoom so that we can have some questions for our panelists. Before I begin, I would like to introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Greg Zontlik, who serves as Director of Pro Bono Programs at St. Mary's University School of Law Center for Legal and Social Justice, where he has worked since August of 2014. During his time supervising the pro bono program, Greg has overseen the implementation of the community service graduation requirements for the JD students at St. Mary's Law. In 2020, Greg received the Pro Bono Coordinator of the Year award from the State Bar of Texas. As a pro bono attorney, Greg has served as clemency counsel for the ABA's Death Penalty Representation Project and has volunteered with the State Bar of Texas's Texas Legal Answers website. Next, we have Fawaz Baum, is a partner at Hutton Andrews Kurth and practices capital finance and real estate law. Fawaz is a member of the firm's pro bono leadership team, and he chairs the pro bono committee in the Dallas office. He devotes time to several pro bono efforts, such as launching and leading Dallas Attorney Volunteer Program's virtual legal clinic and leading the small business clinics in Dallas area and volunteering at DBA Legal Lines. He's also externed with the Honorable Catherine Haynes, U.S. Court of Appeals at the Fifth Circuit, and was named one of the 20 most inspiring leaders of 2020 by the Dallas Business Journal and 2021 Lawyer of the Year by the Dallas Bar Association's Legal Aid of Northwest Texas and DVAP for his pro bono service accomplishments and community advocacy. And last but not least, we have Robert Anderson, who is a family law attorney in Dallas. He pursued pro bono work to jumpstart his work as a lawyer, and after graduating from Pitt Law School, he spent 27 years as a wealth management advisor and private banker. After retiring from banking, he returned back to the law and used pro bono as a way to develop his network, learn the system and processes of the justice system, and get some practical experience. That hard work paid off as he received the Dallas Association Pro Bono of the Year award in 2020, and in 2019 was named Outstanding Solo Practitioner by the Dallas Volunteer Attorney Program. As you can see, we have an amazing panel today here full of great expertise. So let's jump right in with Greg. Greg, I know in your experience, you have working with law students and newer attorneys. So what advice right off the bat do you have for new and young lawyers who want to get involved in pro bono?
Well, first, Callie, thank you for the invitation to take part, and thanks to the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers for centering pro bono in this conversation. And I think, that expression of gratitude leads into what advice I would give to young lawyers or law students, lawyers to be, which is don't be afraid. Make it a part of your practice, but don't feel like it needs to be anything other than what you need it to be. One of the great opportunities that we have as members of the bar, especially in Texas, is that there's a pro bono opportunity for every level of commitment, whether it is answering questions through Texas Free Legal Answers, or being a volunteer with the Texas Legal Services live chat function, taking part in one of the clinics that DVAP or other volunteer lawyer associations around the state operate, or taking on extended representation by working as a private attorney involved with one of our federally funded legal services organizations. You can really scale your involvement, and you can really tailor it to maybe an area that you've always been interested in and maintain as a part of your practice, or an area that you've always been interested in, but is outside of your area of practice. And you can get support from expert attorneys at the supporting legal aid organizations and from other resources throughout our great bar to support you in that work. And so that would be my advice. Don't let the, sort of as the cliche goes, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You might have this vision for what you'd like your pro bono practice to be down the road, and it might get there at some point. It might not start out that, and that's okay too. Try something. If you like it, keep going with it. If you don't, try something new.
I think that's great, meet where you are kind of thing. And I think at the end of this presentation, I will put up a graphic that shows some organizations within Dallas and national that you can get involved in, whatever level you're in. So I think that's great advice that you don't have to know all to kind of come as you are. And Rob, I want to throw the question to you kind of in the similar spirit. I know that you're newer to pro bono in that effort. What has been your experience as someone newer in pro bono, and some advice that you may have for new and young lawyers that want to get involved?
I think pro bono allowed me to kind of negotiate law in general. I mean, there's so many opportunities. I was brought up in a financial background, got to know family law, just in general. I mean, just many areas of law. So it was great for me in terms of getting to know the law. So yeah.
I think that that's something that a lot of individuals don't understand, is you don't have to know everything. Maybe you've never practiced family law before, but that's something that you can start, with pro bono with the right guidance. And Fawaz, I want to throw it to you kind of with a question towards the level of commitment within a firm. I know a lot of attorneys start out at a firm setting, whether that's solo or big firm. What level of a firm involvement and support do you currently have? And is that normal? Any advice for young lawyers on how to get kind of support from their firm?
Yeah, great question. And thank you again to Callie and the organization for having us here today to talk about pro bono. But yeah, from the firm's perspective, most of all firms want to have some sort of pro bono practice. That's not going to be groundbreaking news here, right? But yes, the question of how much support are you going to have, how much are they going to be able to push you forward and be okay with you taking on a pro bono project while you've got clients, billable work sitting on the side waiting to be completed. And really, most of the firms, especially in this day and age, right, not the 80s, not the 90s, they're very aware that pro bono has to be part of their comprehensive overview and pitch to their clients. And not only do we do amazing work, but we're also helping different organizations. We are taking on pro bono matters. We're also doing community service. And that really sets these firms apart. So from our firm's perspective, for instance, from the early 90s, we focused on pro bono. And we actually have a requirement that 100% of our attorneys participate in pro bono every year. And we've hit that goal for the last, I believe, 12 years at this point in time. And in order to facilitate that, to make it easier on our attorneys, all the way from the first year associate all the way up to the senior partners, is you need to have an infrastructure. You need to have a committee. You need to have the ability to bring projects in that excite folks, that make it easy to volunteer, to get the CLE, the training on an area like family law, so you can launch into something without feeling like you're out in the ocean, out in the open ocean by yourself. And so our firm's done a good job of structuring a committee that brings together, it's open to everyone in the firm in our Dallas office. And they bring up ideas of, we haven't done this in a while. We haven't done that in a while. I met this person at this program. I think that person would be great to come in to do a presentation. And then from there, we target specific projects that are focused on transactional folks that might be a little bit more comfortable. So you're not going in for a full-blown litigation matter. And even the litigators that aren't comfortable with the transactional, I don't read agreements all day long, I don't know how to do this, we've got something for them as well. So I think that's a key factor. And, I can appreciate every firm's different, but you as someone that's interested in pro bono can lead the effort of saying, okay, I can't do a full-blown committee, or my firm really wants this. It's a perfect opportunity to show leadership in your firm, and also start small, like Greg was saying, and you can build it into whatever you need it to be.
First of all, that's outstanding that your firm has such a great participation rate, not only within the firm, but just continually to grow that. Just a follow up to that, what advice or kind of what scenario would you give to a young attorney to approach maybe their senior attorney or their partner and say, hey, I want to take on this pro bono case. It is going to, be a part of a case I take on, and I may have to use some resources from the firm like Lexis or whatever that is. What would that conversation look like, and what would you suggest on something like that if someone wants to do that?
Yeah, certainly do your homework, right? Understand what hopefully if this is completely brand new and you're approaching a partner or senior leadership regarding a organization that you've never worked with, or perhaps they really don't have any focus on pro bono, you want to do your homework to understand what your ask is going to be, right? You want to be specific. You don't want to go in there and saying, hey, I have this project that came around my desk and I just don't know what it entails, but would you support me? I think doing your homework to understand, I'm going to partner up with DVAP to take a few cases, or maybe one case, and they have resource attorneys available to help me. It's not our area. I understand we don't have an expert in family law or immigration law. They're going to help me. From our perspective, anytime we do a clinic or a new program, one of the things we look through is the logistical mapping of that. And what I mean by that is, who is covering malpractice on your working on that pro bono case? When you work with DVAP and several organizations that have been well established, they are taking on the malpractice claim for initial intake, for any of the initial items you're doing, right? So that provides a lot of comfort to leadership to understand, okay, you've thought about this. You're not just asking for a Lexis free hour. You've thought about the mechanics of how this is going to work. We're going to do the intake clinic. It's going to be very easy. I can get 2 or 3 people that I've already talked to that are interested in it. It's minimal commitment. It's got great reward, great upside. Here's how the process works. And oh, by the way, we're covered under DVAP's malpractice insurance during that time. So I think doing that really does help. And I've seen that pan out for many, many smaller firm practices or even medium firm practices that haven't really thought about pro bono in a real sense in a while.
That's really cool. And like you said, I love the idea of like showing leadership within, something that's outside of a way that, is filling hours. So I appreciate that. Greg, I wanted to talk to you a bit about this phenomenon that happens when you're in law school and you're all about pro bono and you get to be involved in like aspects under attorneys, and then you graduate, you take the bar, and then you start practicing law and you kind of fall off. And whether that's because you took the bar and you realize how much law there is and that you know nothing about it, or if that's, taken by just a lot of time. But do you have any advice or for students after law school that fall off, whether they're like waiting for the bar results or anything like that, to kind of get re-engaged and either during that period or when they're younger?
It's a great question. And if I may be so bold, and this is an occupational hazard of working at a law school, I'm going to question the premise of the notion of falling off, or that your engagement is going to be linear and constant throughout your career. And in part, I think I offer that in a way to maybe make folks feel better. Not because our wonderful lawyers need pats on the back, though we should probably take some more pats on the back than we often get, but rather to think about the way in which your career evolves and the way in which pro bono fits into it, not as that linear story where it's one clear narrative where you started a project in your fall of your 1L year, and this was your way to build experience, and it grew from there and you never gave it up. Some folks will have that. In fact, one of my dear law school classmates actually has a similar experience where he's been a great example and actually maintained a case that started in a law school clinic and ended up working to keep it with him into private practice and throughout his career. It's remarkable, but that's an exception rather than the rule. I think what folks are more likely to find is identifying where they are in a given career, whether it's with a certain employer, with their own practice as they're maybe heading out on their own or in a smaller firm, and then seeing what is calling to me in terms of the kind of work to do now. Like where do I find that inspiration? Are there community organizations that I've had an opportunity to work with that are coming to me with actually, kind of repeated questions around legal needs? Or if I don't have that, do I know where's the parallel structure? Maybe I had a pro bono program at law school that helped facilitate or advertise events. where's the volunteer lawyer program in my community? Where's the bar section, maybe, depending on your practice, that's organizing these projects? And again, you try something out rather than think, okay, I've got to get back up to this level that I was doing when I was a second year law student or something like that. No, like now you're an attorney. How am I going to incorporate this into a practice? And I don't have to, I think that can sometimes be the daunting step in that transition in mindset from I'm going to work under someone's supervision to I am the attorney. Oh no, am I ready to take this on? As Foz and Rob have pointed out, there are infrastructures in place to support you in that too. So I would, again, going back to what you mentioned before, Callie, where you are in your career at that time, that's a chance to write a new chapter, even if it's not narratively structured in a sequential way. That's a chance to re-engage and even to identify new areas. I think that's one of the great things about the practice of law. You always have a chance to try something new. That license, as a supervisor once told me, gives you, the broad privilege and opportunity to work on a variety of cases, and pro bono can be that avenue for that exploration.
Thanks for that. So we've kind of figured out how to start, right? We thought about that. Rob, I want to ask you, and I know that no two organizations are the same, but can you walk us through what happens when you raise your hand at a pro bono organization and you get a case assigned? What are expectations? And like I said, I know no organization is the same, but what has been your experience in that?
I think all the organizations I've worked with have been excellent in terms of support. So most organizations that I've worked with put out a list of possible cases that you can take with some kind of description of what you're going to be involved with. So that's a good start. And then when you volunteer to do that, most of them send, specific instructions on how to go about it, as well as forms to go with it. So for like a standard divorce, you get a petition to divorce, you get like all the documents involved, you get a pro forma order. And then they also support you with mentors. So for like DVAP, I mean, Kristen Salas and Catherine Saldana are great people to talk to in terms of like, if you have any issues with the case you're working on, they're there to help you out. And like, you've got backup in terms of insurance, and you're just kind of like under their wing all the way. And maybe you get to the end and it's just you, but for the whole experience, it's, you feel like you're backed up by competent individuals. So doing different stuff, I mean, doing different things in terms of like maybe a guardianship or something like that. I mean, they always have information to provide to you. And it makes it a really good experience and a learning experience if you haven't worked in that area before. I mean, I would encourage people to do something that they're not familiar with, because it's there. I mean, why not take advantage of it and find out if you like it or not?
Yeah, one thing about attorneys is sometimes we don't like being uncomfortable, and pro bono can kind of bring that out of us. Fawaz, I want to throw it to you to kind of talk about something that Rob hit on, and that's that mentor shadowing aspect of it. What has been your experience within organizations that do that similar thing, and anything to add to that?
Yeah, and to kind of springboard off what Rob was saying, I remember when I started out and got my first DVAP case, I looked at it and I was like, this is something that this organization can do. They have attorneys in-house. Why is this coming to me? And you quickly realize you're absolutely right. They could do that one case you have in-house, but the sheer volume they have, one, to the fact that they're trying to empower us, attorneys that are doing other things, to do a little bit of pro bono to spread the good around. It now flips your mindset a little bit, right? So, and I say that to say, you will have those mentors that have done this a few dozen times that past year on your particular case. So when you approach them with a question, it's not something they haven't thought about before. And in the rare instances, maybe where it is, they have a colleague or some resource that they can quickly tap to get the best answer. So I've had a lot of exposure to Texas CBAR, DVAP, There are a couple other organizations out in the suburbs as well that mimic what DVAP does. And each one of them has definitely mentor attorneys on standby. But they also have, like Rob mentioned, forums. They have these amazing forums that they work with themselves and that they're very comfortable with. And they share those forms with you depending on what what matter you're taking on. Then you also have, usually they'll put in some questionnaires, they'll put in some checklists. DVAP has a great resource bank as well to just get you some additional information to get you comfortable with, okay, how does this conservatorship really work? I haven't ever dealt with that situation before. And then obviously picking up the phone and calling one of the mentor attorneys will kind of bring you to home base. So there's so many avenues to get you comfortable, and all of that is to empower you to complete that one matter and feel good that, okay, I moved the needle. I didn't drastically stop a war or anything, but I made a huge impact in that one person's life. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? It is hard to affect change on a global, national, or even a state scale, but you can certainly, with your law license, like Greg mentioned, such a powerful tool, impact that one person. And that one person, to them, you are their savior, right? You alleviated a problem they had that only you could do. So I would not, I know the fear is there, but certainly don't be shy and start off slow. Like Rob and Greg both said, there's no pressure on, I need to do X amount or take on the most complicated. Take on something that you think is a good introduction into an area of law that you might have an inclination towards. So.
Oh, as I want to stick with you for a minute, and only to highlight something that you did within DVAP, bringing it online. And I know that that's something huge for attorneys, especially younger attorneys that may not have the ability to go out, during their lunch break or to go out during a business day to do that. So can you kind of explain what you've done there and how younger attorneys can get involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And I'll set the stage a little bit since I can appreciate not everyone had the benefit of going to an intake clinic before the pandemic started, but DVAP essentially runs 14 in-person clinics pre-pandemic, or did. And that took the form of DVAP showing up maybe at 5 o'clock to set up the room. Applicants would start arriving around 5, fill out intake information, income verification information, fill out a bunch of DVAP forms, submit that back to DVAP right there. The DVAP rep would look through them, make sure that they filled out everything they needed to, ask up any follow-up questions, and then the applicant would go wait in a waiting room. The attorneys would show up around 6, and then from 6 to about 8, the DVAP rep would give a file that was just completed to the attorney, and the attorney would conduct a quick intake interview with the applicant, maybe about 10 minutes. If it's a divorce case, there's a divorce checklist. Okay, let me see what I can fill out here real quick. Their baby's crying. There are other people that are getting impatient. The room is a little stuffy. And then that was pretty much the intake clinic. And you would say, thank you, and DVAP will be in touch with you in about 2, 3, 4 weeks. What we did was we streamed. When the pandemic hit, obviously all those in-person clinics had to shut down. They could not function anymore. And that was a big void in Dallas, where how would people that need help, that have real problems that are continuing aside from the pandemic, going to get access to legal resources? And the virtual clinic essentially moved that entire process online. So now the way that this functions is an applicant can fill out all the information DVAP would have taken in person through an online portal. They can do it on a tablet, on a phone, on a desktop computer at their leisure, at their time, at their comfort, submit it all in. Every Thursday, we have a virtual clinic that is either sponsored by one law firm or multiple law firms, where the attorneys will run through the intake process just like they would in the in-person clinic, but they do it from the comfort of their office, their home. and they're the one selecting. The applicant can put down, I prefer to be called between 2 and 4, but really the attorney gets to decide, okay, between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on that Thursday, in between my billable work, I can call this person at 3:45. You call them through a private number because we obviously want to ensure privacy. And you connect with the applicant. You get all the information you would in the in-person clinic. You spend 10, 15 minutes, but they're comfortable because they didn't have to take time off of work, arrange for childcare. They're not in a foreign place. They're at home. They've taken a break from work. They don't feel like they're wasting their time. The attorney loves it because they're in the comfort of what they know as well, and are able to complete the process and submit all the information through another portal that goes right back to DVAP. And then DVAP does the hard work in the back to streamline that matter forward and get in touch with that applicant 2 weeks from the clinic. In addition, the attorneys have access in real time to questionnaires, checklists, resources on maybe 20 different subject matters. So if you're dealing with a custody, a divorce, a litigation matter, a extension case, all of that information is available. So when you're talking to your applicant on the phone, you're looking at what you need to ask them the best questions to get the best information. It's a very seamless, very easy, very intuitive process. And we've seen that as a win for all three people, the applicants, the attorneys, and DVAP.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for explaining that. And I think that's a great resource for, younger attorneys who may not feel the need to take on a whole case, but they can help with this like first intake step from the comfort. We had a question come through, Greg, and I'm going to throw this to you. And it's a question surrounding healthy boundaries and pro bono work, both healthy boundaries and balancing your firm work with your pro bono work, but also the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions that come along with some pro bono cases that you may take on. Do you have any tips, tricks for producing good work for your pro bono client and for your firm while ensuring that your mental health is taken care of?
Yeah, it's a great question and the right one to ask. What I would recommend, and again, my experience is on balancing workloads, though not necessarily in a firm setting, is best that you can, as you're accepting your pro bono work, or you're signing up for either a clinic, a series of clinics, or for extended representation, talk to folks either at the host organization, whether it's DVAP or your legal aid organization, to try to get a ballpark of two things. One, what roughly speaking, what does the time commitment look for this case? Not because you're necessarily trying to budget things out to the quarter of the hour, though obviously there's billing concerns, but you're trying to create, as Fawaz said, understand the logistics and sort of backwards design. Okay, if I'm taking on this divorce, it appears that there's no property, no children. It's what theoretically could be a simple divorce. We know there might be some unexpected matters that arise. I'm roughly thinking about this many hours. You've got the filing, so a little bit up here. You've got your 60-day period. You've got your prove up. Not only does this work in terms of my schedule, but I know that I can give myself comfortably the time I need for it, maybe a little bit of extra, while still making sure I'm keeping up on the work for my cases. So that time estimate is helpful there. But as a part of that conversation, it's probably worth asking too, whether it's your colleagues at the firm, colleagues in private practice, or folks at the Volunteer Lawyer Association or the Legal Aid Organization, if there's anything to prepare yourself, anything that you know about these types of cases beyond the hours, because you can quantify it and map that out, and that's helpful. But as Callie said, cases, and speaking of things not happening on a linear basis, not only might some of the questions, some of the work show up at an unexpected hour, and you're going to want to make sure you've got time for that, but sometimes there are challenges or facts that are difficult, and even something that might seem straightforward, or where the legal component of your assistance is relatively straightforward. It's drafting a document, it's making sure that somebody has a power of attorney lined up. The facts that come out during that can be quite challenging, and they can affect practitioners. Sometimes it's referred to as a secondary trauma, or just, just dealing with difficult facts, they can affect you or us as attorneys in unexpected ways and unexpected times too. So while you can't necessarily map that out, you can't necessarily block out in your calendar, like, okay, like I'm going to take 45 minutes off on Thursday to just sort of decompress and process what's going on. A, you might want to do that. And B, it can just be helpful to kind of anticipate, all right, like this is likely to come up. I'm going to need to carve out some more time just to take care of myself, just so that I am at my best and can provide zealous advocacy, not only for my paying clients, but for my pro bono clients. And that I have enough energy in my tank so that I can make that, one of the things we've been talking about as a panel is make this a part of your practice in an ongoing way. I think, for those of us who are involved in various levels, what we encourage is that this can be something you do throughout your practice. However, if something sneaks up on you and you get burned out because of an unanticipated, challenge with the case, it would be a shame for a very difficult situation to foreclose for you the desire to continue to do this work when we know that the unmet legal needs of our community are so great. So a few tips. Hopefully that's helpful for you, Caitlin, and for others as well.
And I think, Rob, I want to give you a chance to answer that as well. Do you have anything to add of what you've seen as someone who's a solo practitioner? I'm sure that balance is a little bit easier, maybe it's blurred, but do you have any tips, tricks for individuals who are trying to balance the pro bono and their mental health when dealing with, a bunch of different clients who, need your attention?
I think when you sign up for like DVAP or something and they send out the list of cases, they kind of make it clear which cases are difficult and which are not. So like a simple divorce, maybe an uncontested divorce, I don't think it's going to be that much of a strain on you. Guardianships, that's another matter entirely. I mean, guardianships can take a long time. So if you have an idea of how much time you can give, I think you can look at that list and say, this is what I can do. I mean, if it's going to be a child custody situation, maybe a little more difficult. Probate matters, maybe difficult. If you're doing an immigration case, that's going to be a burden probably because they take so long. So I think when you look at the list and kind of get an understanding and talk to the people at DVAP or the other organizations you're working with, just to get an idea of how much time it's going to take and how much effort it's going to take away from what you do, your job in general. So that would be my input. And I think Greg was on point with that.
Oh, thanks. Speaking with the DVAP theme, Fawaz, I think you have intrigued an individual who is asking specific questions about DVAP. So I'm going to throw that to you. They're asking if someone comes to you and not DVAP with a case, is there a way to get DVAP involved? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way it has to work, if you want to go through, have access to DVAP resources, have access to the trainings DVAP has, that client does need to come through the DVAP intake process. And the reason I'll say this is, and the reason why they have the intake process to begin with, right, is they are trying to make sure that everyone walking through their doors actually needs help, can't afford help otherwise. So, and this is probably a little bit more information than they want to know, but from DVAP's point of view, behind the scenes, at any point in time, they're securing grants, they're raising funds, and each one of those projects come with strings attached to make sure it's being used accurately. So just like we would want them to be held accountable for every dollar they spend, this is part of that process. So if I was in your shoes, I would have them submit through DVAP. I think DVAP's, don't quote me on this, but I think it's either 150% or 125% of the poverty line is where they're absolutely able to help. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
It's 150.
150, great. And, so if they don't meet that cutoff, then they won't be eligible to go through the DVAP process. And if they do, then they would, and you would just let DVAP organization know that, hey, I'm already signed up. I want to take this client the minute they get through your doors, and they would be more than happy to have you have the first pick on it.
Cool. Good to know. The more you know, right? Appreciate that. We have another question. I'm going to throw it to Greg. As a law student, I remember doing these intake clinics in San Antonio alongside you. What is, to the capacity, can law students do that? How do they start getting involved? I'm sure this is your platform. I'll let you take it from there.
All right, so let's extend this by an extra 15 minutes. I'll try to keep it brief. I think it was Adia who asked the question. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. So yes, law students can be involved. As Callie referenced earlier in one of the questions, while law students, as you well know, if you are a law student, cannot provide legal advice, not yet being a licensed attorney, you can work under attorney supervision. So your specific question was about intake clinics. While I would defer to DVAP and the host organizations on the exact mechanics of how they incorporate non-attorney volunteers like law students, as a general practice, as a general principle, yes, law students are encouraged and invited to take part. For laws can probably, not to put them on the spot, I know that many firms, especially during their summer programs, incorporate pro bono work, whether it's through a virtual clinic or an in-person clinic, or even work on extended representation cases. They involve their summer associates on that work. And for law students who are not part of a firm with a formal program like that, there are any number of opportunities, whether it's, in a program that's done in collaboration with your law school or facilitated through your law school and local legal services organizations, or even through work through private practitioners and small or medium firms doing work under attorney supervision. Law students have a number of ways of plugging into pro bono practice. And in fact, there's something about this answer too that also I think might be an invitation for new attorneys to think about, who are thinking, how can I manage, you're talking about boundaries, and how can I manage my own engagement and time and commitment to pro bono work? Law students can be available to work on these cases as well. And while I know that supervising not yet attorneys isn't always something that folks, are comfortable with or know to do, law students bring to bear a lot of energy, their Lexis and Westlaw passwords to do research, within the terms of their use, I'm sure, of course. I'm not encouraging anything untoward there for those who are watching. And a desire to learn and tackle and gain that experience. So for law students, yes, there's lots of ways to get in. Be on the lookout from your law schools and from your supervising attorneys and from local bar associations. There's usually a lot of events where especially young lawyers associations across the state will engage law students and new attorneys on these projects. And for practitioners as well, remember that law students can be a resource to you while engaging in this pro bono work.
And so just a plug for Dallas Young Lawyers, we have a pro bono committee within DAYL. So it's really cool to be able to be engaged with other individuals who are going through the same struggles as you as a young attorney, who may not fully understand your case, but can commiserate. As we know, attorneys love to commiserate. So I think that that's a really good point to be made, that surround yourself with individuals who can be helpful to you, both mental health wise and within your practice. Rob, I'm gonna throw this to you for a family law case. We have a question coming in that says that they'll be taking a family law case, and he received his first one recently. Is there any organization, a pro bono organization, that will provide them with a comprehensive file of template documents that they'll have to produce, things like that, or is that really organizational based?
So is he taking the case through an organization? Do we know that? If it's DVAP, they definitely provide resources in terms of forms, et cetera, and guidance. So there's generally a specific instruction list as to how to go through the case. And then the forms go with it. As I said before, mentors are there to help you along the way if you have questions. Am I missing the question, or?
No, and follow up on that question. Is that something, let's say I'm taking a case, a family law case for the first time, and I would just like to see those forms. It's not for DVAP, but I'm just a young attorney, I'm solo, or whatever that may be. Is that a resource that DVAP or another pro bono organization has?
My experience with working with DVAP over the years is if you have an issue outside of DVAP, they're willing to help you. It's happened to me before. I've had a case that was not pro bono and didn't know the forms to use, and called the mentors, and they were happy to provide them. I don't think there's any kind of
Gatekeeping
animosity
happening.
towards somebody poaching. I mean, I think they just want to help, really.
Yeah. Well, I think that answers the question, and that's nice to see that, especially within Dallas, where figuring out lawyers as best we can. The law is ever changing, and everyone's always grabbing new cases. So it's nice to see collaboration across, just no gatekeeping or no animosity, as Rob would say. I want to spend, the next portion of this kind of asking the panelists the same question, seeing how it's affected them differently. I want to start with you. How has pro bono shaped yourself as an attorney and your career as an attorney?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, I think, for each one of us. But I, and Greg mentioned this too, in law school, I was part of a clinic. So all these law schools pretty much have a clinic program, have a community service component, right? With the idea that let's get you familiar with what pro bono means. And it's nice to kind of lean into those opportunities when you get them. Most of us obviously go to law school knowing that we want to affect change and we want to do good. And pro bono's really one of the, at its core, that's what you're trying to do. No matter where your practice is going to go, left or right or center, it is good to be doing pro bono. And I got licensed in 2013, joined my firm in 2013, took my first pro bono case in 2013, and have kept that level. To Greg's point, it ebbs and flows. Some years are a little bit better than others, but consistently kept the interest in pro bono going. I'm a transactional lawyer. I don't like to go in the courtroom often, but I've taken on a revenge porn case and gone to court with my colleagues to battle to get my client her life back from a jilted lover. So there's so much that you can do and affect that it's important to keep in mind all the various opportunities that pro bono opens up. It opens up your knowledge base, to Rob's point. It brings your ability to explore an area that you never would have explored but for pro bono, right? You're being shepherded through a process to help somebody. It allows you to turn into a community advocate, where after you've done a couple of things, you learn, okay, well, this needs to change on a systemic level, on a county level, on a city level. And you'll start to hear about organizations like Texas Appleseed, who's done remarkable work in the truancy department that children are faced and now was solved. So that brings another level of joy, knowing that, okay, I helped 1% by moving that along. And it really helps you with business development. And I will say, obviously from a billing perspective, we're always working, we're always satisfying our clients' needs, but it's really refreshing. And I get this question a lot when, how do I network? How do I meet people? I don't want to go in there with an agenda, trying to win someone's business or whatnot. I agree. Don't do any of that. Go meet people wherever they are, at whatever organization they are. Don't talk about what you do. Don't talk about anything. Talk about pro bono. And just watch people's reaction to, oh, wow, didn't realize you did this, or you were part of that, or how did that work out? And the interest you'll develop just based off of that conversation will put you further ahead than anything else you could have done, right? So it's all about unlocking the way you're thinking about pro bono. It's not a liability. It's not something that you have to do either 100% or 0%. There's so many mixes in between. It doesn't have to be transactional only. If you're transactional, you can do some litigation. If you're a litigator, you can do some transactional, and it'll work seamlessly. And I think I'll close with this point. It's kind of the freeing item of our practice, right? A lot of things that we do, we know what needs to get done. It's stressful. It's difficult. We don't have maybe all the resources at the same time. Pro bono is freeing in that matter that you are trying to solve the problem in the best way you can with what you have and what your applicant is presenting you with. And any amount of help moves mountains in their view. A lot of these folks never have had a professional even listen in on their problem. So something that it might be trivial to us of like, oh, we'll just call this department and that department, have them talking, and boom, you're done. To them, that's just eye-opening, right? So being able to take stock every so often and say, okay, yep, I helped move things along does wonders for your practice as well.
Very insightful. And I love the idea of, speaking the good into the world that hopefully other people can see and use you as an example of, I can do that. If he's a transactional attorney and doesn't like being in courtroom and he took a litigation case, maybe I can read one contract, as a litigator. And I think that's a very powerful thing that we don't as attorneys. We get together and we commiserate, right? Instead of talking about all the good we're doing, we talk about, we have this client that does this, or we have these many billable hours that are due. So it's nice to be able to share that hope and that joy. As a law student and doing these intake clinics and being a part of the pro bono under Greg, it cannot be understated the amount of gratitude that individuals, like you were saying, have that have never seen a professional, who have never had someone just tell them, hey, you probably shouldn't do this, but do this. And I think you may have a different outcome. It's just next level. And we are given such a gift when we get our JD and our bar card, that it's great to see that experience within a firm as yours, Fawaz, and within your career. Rob, I'm going to throw it to you next. How has pro bono involvement shaped your career and yourself as an attorney?
Well, totally changed the direction I was going with my practice. I mean, initially I was going to do estate planning with an investment management overlay. I did DVAP mainly just to understand how courts worked and things like that. But the first client I met was a battered woman who was at a women's shelter. Kind of really overwhelmed me in a certain sense that I was able to help her. So yeah, I mean, that, and meeting the clients I've met over the past 4 years, I mean, there's an obvious need for legal services, right? Then they can't afford them. And if you're in a situation where you can't afford it, that's not a good place to be. So, I mean, the things I'm doing are like standard rate, uncontested divorce, $500, we'll do it. Stuff like that. I mean, it just really changed my mindset, got me more into the community. I mean, we all are in the community, but we don't see all the parts of it. But when you go there and when you visit somebody in person, when you visit somebody at a women's shelter or something like that, I mean, it moved me to say, hey, these people need help, and I want to provide it for them.
Yeah, we hear so many stories just like that, Rob, of individuals who need the help. And I just think of all the individuals whose stories we don't know because, they didn't have that opportunity to meet you, Rob, or to meet someone at DVAP, or to get those experiences. And, I'm just as guilty as the next person of thinking like, oh, well, if they need help, people will help them. They'll find it through DVAP, they'll find it through another organization. And having a bar card is an honor and a privilege, and one that, I can't imagine what it's like to walk into the women's shelter like that and have a client just so excited to see you there. So thanks for sharing that. I know that that's hard to kind of come to terms with. And I think that that's important, that, things can change and law is fluid, especially with, how you want to approach your practice or what you want to agree to and go into. So I think that's really cool. Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm very excited to hear how pro bono has shaped your career. I know that you get to work with law students that are energetic and excited to be there all the time. So I'm very excited to hear how it's affected you.
Yeah, in thinking about this question, there's kind of two tracks in which I'm thinking, two buckets I'm thinking of. One is that I have pro bono. I'm very privileged to have pro bono literally in my job title. I get to oversee and facilitate and coordinate and really amplify our law students' engagement in pro bono work. And in the course of doing that, I get to collaborate not only with our wonderful law students, who, yes, at all times are enthusiastic and excited, especially right after, finals or midterms or something. But I get to connect them with members of the bar, be it legal services organizations, private practitioners, government nonprofit agencies, to help them not only get that practical experience and provide a broader and leverage those organizations' service to the community and to their clients, but through that, play some role in accompanying law students and the lawyers of tomorrow in exploring and discerning their own practices. And statistically speaking, even though my full-time job is working in and around public interest and pro bono, statistically speaking, our graduates overwhelmingly go into private practice. And yet to know that they have been introduced to this work, we do have as Kelly mentioned before, we do have the graduation requirement that all students take part in some form of pro bono service as well as community service, to know that they've had at least some exposure to some of the issues facing our community members and the opportunities that they'll have as members of the bar. It's incredibly rewarding. It's a pathway that I knew, technically speaking, I knew existed when I was in law school, but the amount of meaning I have derived from it, and both in that work in terms of the programmatic work and in some of the client representation work we do here at the Center for Legal and Social Justice as well, has been extremely formative and meaningful. The other bucket, just quickly, is my own pro bono involvement. I know we mentioned it briefly at the beginning of my intro. When your whole job is pro bono, my whole job is pro bono, it's sort of interesting. Okay, but when's the part that comes outside of the 9 to 5? And boundaries. Maybe I'm probably okay on the answer I gave before about boundaries, but yes, that is one boundary where it's sort of blurry. Is this the day job? Is this off the clock? How does this work? But I have had the opportunity to engage in projects both, in smaller in scale and larger in scale. And one that was mentioned was the opportunity to assist as clemency counsel through the ABA's Death Penalty Representation Project. That's something that is not in the course of my normal work, and really came in some ways by happenstance. And I was at a conference around public interest law. I heard a presentation and I passed my card over to say, hey, if you ever need law students and want to collaborate, let's talk. And that passing of the card turned into, hey, you're a lawyer in Texas. Can you come work on this? And that fortuitous connection was in many ways not only a deeply formative professional experience, but also a personal one as well. Again, while that's sort of a blurring of boundaries that I might not recommend in general, it's, I think, important for our own well-being to be able to keep things separate. I feel very grateful for the opportunities that my bar card and my perhaps unwitting willingness to take part in a pro bono project led for my own growth as a person. And outside of that, I would just echo everything Rob and Fawaz said. The doors that open and have opened for me from my work in and around pro bono and the public interest has led to really interesting and meaningful opportunities to not only work on a case-by-case basis, but to start to work on things on a more structural level as well.
That's so cool. And I think it speaks to not only the power of pro bono, but the power of just being authentic and being, who you are as an attorney is not, who you are as a person. And so I think that, pro bono brings in the humanity aspect of the law that, sometimes we all need. So with the last 5 minutes, I'm going to put up a JPEG of a photo of organizations within Dallas and national that individuals can start getting involved in. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to quickly, not quickly, you have about 5 minutes. If you could give impart one piece of advice around pro bono to those listening today, what would that be? So let me share this and I will start with Rob.
So just jump in. I mean, there's a safety net there. Like I said before, If you look at the descriptions of cases, you can get an idea how much time it's going to take. Talk to the organization about how much time it's going to take. Bite off what you can chew, but join the club in terms of doing the pro bono work. I mean, it's a great thing. And most of all, it's great for the community. I mean, I can't underemphasize that. So anything you can do in terms of pro bono work is a boon to the community. That would be my.
Yeah, and you're surrounded by amazing people and you're in great company when you do that. Fawaz, I'm going to jump to you.
My one piece of advice is exactly like Rob said, explore these organizations, because each one of them does something a little bit different and might be organized in a different manner that might speak to you a little bit more. But ultimately, find your passion. It doesn't have to be, let your passion kind of drive. Oh, I love working with this organization because of the people. I love working with this organization because of the cause. I love it because of X, Y, Z. Let that be what kind of pushes you forward, and then just see where that takes you. It'll be very exciting.
Awesome. And Greg, last but not least.
Yeah, I would say, just as a final word of encouragement, that this is also, it's an opportunity for creativity too. That not only within these organizations that are looking for volunteers and are always ready to put you to work, it's a chance to not only explore new areas and create new knowledge for yourself, but try new approaches and think about advocacy from a different perspective, and think about the whole suite of tools at your disposal as a lawyer and as an advocate on behalf of your clients. And that has the potential to unlock for you continued growth and meaning within the profession.
Awesome. Well, I want to again thank each of our panelists for their time today. The CLE course number has been put in the chat and will be available for you to self-report to the State Bar of Texas. I hope that this was informative. I hope that you now are excited. Our JDs and our bar cards sometimes carry a lot of weight with them, and these are amazing organizations to be a part of and to explore your passions. So with that, thank you all so much for your time for our panelists, and I appreciate all of what you've done for not only the Dallas community, but for the lawyer profession as a whole. So we're excited to join your ranks, and we will see you all around. Thanks again.